There was three. You're still not ready. Do I have to gavel again?
Yeah.
All right. All right. I'm going to do it again. Mike said I had to do it 3 times. All right. Are we ready? All right. I'll ask him. Okay. Welcome to the Board of Education's June 8th, 2023 regular session meeting. Please stand as we observe a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Deckard. Thank you, Ms. Deckard. As we public notice, Ms. Bike is out of town on business and will be attending electronically this evening. Ms. Bike, can you hear us okay? Okay. I wanted to remind everyone, in keeping with tradition, our July board meetings will be held the second week of July due to the July 4th holiday. Our work session is scheduled for Monday, July 10th, with the regular session following on Thursday, July 13th. Both meetings will start at the normal 5 p.m. time. Also, we are glad you chose to attend this evening, but please note that elevated noise makes it difficult for us to hear each other and for you to hear us, and also for those viewing from home to hear. So if you need to have a discussion with someone sitting next to you, we ask that you please step outside to do so. Board members and staff, I just wanted to remind you again to speak into your microphones when you're voting or speaking this evening, especially so we can ensure that Ms. Bike can hear us and we can hear her. And with that, do we have any requested changes to this agenda? Was there an item, Mr. Dupour?
Madam Chair, if I may, item 11C is not ready for this agenda legally. It was a bit ambitious to put it on there, but we tried. We hope to have negotiations wrapped up and completed by next month. So if that would be withdrawn, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, that was 11C. Okay. All right, so any other requested changes? So motion to approve by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I believe we have a presentation tonight. Superintendent Ricewick, is this, or is it Mr., is this JD?
It is JD and Scott Bolton,
Bolton.
actually. Thank you.
That we're going to turn over. I want to turn over to some folks, but something just to keep in perspective as we talk about this award they're going to discuss. This is an award that's only given to schools, but it's an award that's representative of all employers. So just keep that in mind. And I'm going to introduce some folks and then turn over a brief presentation to those folks. Come on up, fellas. We have General Jim Munganesk, and this is General Tommy Cathan and Steve Martin. They are representatives of ESGR, and I will let them, I'll turn it over, I think, General Jim Ungenest, and let him tell you about the award.
Thank you very much. Madam Chairperson, thanks so much for this opportunity to mention an award and present an award that Knox County Schools is receiving from the State of Tennessee's ESGR Committee. We have 54 committees nationwide, states and territories, and I serve as a state chair. Tommy is the vice chair for the committee for Tennessee, and Steve Martin is my area chair here in the Knoxville area. So ESGR's mission is to work with employers to ensure that they understand the importance of the Guard and Reserve. As you may know, about 40% of our nation's military capability is in the Guard and Reserve. The bulk of those folks work for employers like you, and it's our responsibility to help educate employers of the rules of the road, the laws, et cetera, that apply if you have Guard and Reserve folks that work for you. One of the great things we get to do is recognize fantastic employers. We have awards going from the lowest level to an individual supervisor to what I'll be discussing in a moment, which is the Secretary of Defense Freedom Award. This is an award by the Secretary of Defense. Only 15 are given each year nationwide. This year there were 1,800 or so nominations nationwide. We had about 50 in the state. And each state picks the top large company, the top small company, and the top public sector organization in their state and submit those as their nominees for this prestigious award. This year, we are just excited to know that Knox County Schools is in the hunt for this award. Of those 1,800, Knox County is now in the final 30. Of those 30, 15 will be selected. 5 of them will be public sector employers. So we're crossing our fingers. We're hoping it's coming through. But to get to be a finalist out of 1,800 is quite an accomplishment. As my top nominee in the public sector category, I have the privilege of awarding what's called the Pro Patria Award, the top award that I can give as a state chair to an organization that has done a great job in supporting their Guard and Reserve folks. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tommy Cawthon, who worked this award, I think, with some of your people, and talk a little bit about the award and why your organization was nominated.
Thank you, Jim. It was really my pleasure to work on this award package, this award nomination package. I got to work with some great folks. Major Hicks here, he's with the 278th. He's a teacher at Hardin Valley Academy when he's not doing his military duty. Scott Bolton, enjoyed working with him, and Josh Flory, and JD. And JD came and we gave this award, the Pro Patria. This is kind of the second time we've given this award, but we gave it to him, then he had to bring it back so we could give it again in front of the board. But he came to Nashville to receive that award. We just appreciate all the great work they did to submit this package. I think it's really got a great shot at getting one of these 15 Secretary of Defense Employer Support Freedom Awards. The beauty of these awards is they don't come from the top down, they come from the bottom up. So it starts with an employee of Knox County Schools, in this case, nominating their employer, and then it works its way up until, obviously it's getting the Pro Patria Award tonight, but all the way up to the Secretary of Defense is looking at this. And if this award is given, to Knox County Schools, we will go to the Pentagon to receive that award. So, and hopefully the SecDef will be there to present that if he's not busy doing other things at that time. But so one of the first things that stood out, Major Hicks was very excited about putting Knox County Schools in. He's just gotten outstanding treatment by Knox County Schools during his military service. So we started off with that, and then the more I dug, it's kind of like chewing a piece of bubble gum. The more you chew it, the bigger it gets. Well, that's what I found out with Knox County Schools. Just outstanding human resource policies that support our reserve component members. I got to see some things like the Medal of Honor convention that we had here. Well, 2 of the schools in Knox County hosted Medal of Honor recipients there. the parade that we have every year. 4 of the high schools participated in that with marching bands. We had multiple engagements at high school football games where veterans were identified and were recognized. Knox County is very proud of their veterans and their reserve component members, and that became very obvious, not only in your policies, the HR policies that go well above what the USERRA law requirements are, but just in practice, in practicality, and how you recognize your veterans and your currently serving reserve component members. So, that being said, it's been a pleasure. We got our fingers crossed. We think Knox County Schools has a great opportunity here, a great chance to win the Employer Support Freedom Award. But tonight we want to present the Pro Patria Award. Jim, is there anything else you'd like to say before we do that?
I think you covered it well, so let's bring that out, and if you would like
If we
to
could
come
get
forward.
those who are going to come down to receive the award, please come forward and we'll get a picture and smile and shake hands and do all that good stuff. So come on down in front here, I believe is where we're going to do the picture. Major Hicks, thanks again. Appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
I know. It's a great way to start a meeting. All right. So thank you all for being here. All right. So next on the agenda, we have Mr. Davis, I believe, from the Election Commission, joining us tonight.
Thank you, sir. Superintendent Roswick, KCS administrators, Chair Christie, Vice Chair Henderson, and members of the Board of Education. My name is Chris Davis, and I am the Administrator of Elections for Knox County. First, I want to thank all of you for your service to Knox County, as I know how incredibly difficult it can be to serve as an elected or appointed government official. I sincerely say that. I know all of you, certainly all the members of the Board of Education have gone through an election. It can be a very trying thing at times. I think all of you would agree, but I want to thank all of you for your service, first off. I want to thank you for allowing me just a couple of minutes to discuss how the Election Commission and Knox County Schools have and can continue to work together, I think, for the benefit of both parties. To start off, and as you probably know, election days are set in stone. In Knox County, there are 2 City of Knoxville elections in every odd-numbered year, like 2023, and there are 3 county-wide elections in every even-numbered year, like 2024. The only exception to this is the occasional and hopefully infrequent special election that occurs when there's a vacancy in the Tennessee General Assembly that is untimely. In city elections, the Knox County Election Commission utilizes 25 Knox County Schools facilities, and in county-wide elections, we utilize 51 Knox County Schools facilities. That total comprises almost 2/3 of our polling places. So obviously, our partnership with Knox County Schools is very important to the voters of Knox County. Our 2 organizations have enjoyed what I believe is a very good relationship over the last few years, and I will tell you that folks like Karen Goebel, who is Knox County Schools Facility Use Coordinator, have been amazing to work with in coordinating all the details that have to be addressed in preparing for Election Day. And I will just point out, just kind of a side note, it's not in my notes here, but my friend Jess Hernandez and my coworkers here, he's our Director of Facilities for the Election Commission as well as our Transportation Coordinator. I know he works frequently with Ms. Goebel. And so one of the things I am most pleased with is the commitment of Knox County Schools to continue and schedule non-instructional days on election days. Obviously, as you probably know, gubernatorial and presidential elections, those November even-numbered year elections, by law, you have to be closed. But I do want to say thank you, because to my knowledge, the August 2021 City of Knoxville primary is the only election I'm aware of since at least 2017, and maybe before that, where school was in session. I don't need to tell you, but I'm going to, that with the world we live in today and everyone's heightened sense of cautiousness and anxiety, mixing voters and students is not a good idea. 99% plus of our voters just want to get in, vote, and get out. But I will tell you that on occasion, you probably know this, and I'm sure you maybe encounter this sometimes in meetings, perhaps. There's the angry, the irritated, and sometimes just a smart aleck voter that puts everyone in the polling place, including my workers, on edge. I hope we can all agree that students in schools where voters are is not optimal. Additionally, if someone is registered to vote at a polling place, he or she must be legally allowed to enter to cast his or her ballot. We have run into situations at the Election Commission before where somebody has a court order that dictates that he or she stays away from a particular school. However, if that individual still has the legal right to cast his or her ballot. So then we start getting into some legal murky waters there when we can't exclude someone from the polling place. And so it just gets difficult. So I want to thank you for working with us to continue and try and schedule, in-service days on, or non-instructional days, on election days. What I would like to ask the Board of Education and KCS administration to consider in the future, and certainly I know you have a lot of competing interests, is the possibility of locating in-service locations and other large events in KCS facilities that are not polling places. Every election day, one of the most common complaints that myself and my staff hears is that voters cannot find a parking place because teachers are using all of the parking spaces, or there is no disability parking space. Additionally, I will tell you that events such as band competitions are a nightmare. We found that out just a few years ago at Bearden High School, where I think we had, I'm recollecting, about 40 phone calls in about 15 minutes because no one at Bearden High School could find a place to park because you had a very, which is great, band competitions are awesome. But it's just one of those things that as you develop your schedules in the future, I would ask you just to kind of be cognizant of that. In those 51 facilities, we really want to keep voters and other activities separate if we can, and certainly we have to work with y'all's schedule as well. I do understand the importance of in-service days. I will tell you, my sister-in-law is a KCS principal, and we have many discussions over Sunday night dinners on a variety of school-related topics. And I know that the time is valuable for teachers and administrative personnel. So anything that can be done in the future to look at in-service days and their specific locations so as not to conflict with polling place locations would be appreciated not only obviously by us at the Election Commission, but by the voters of Knox County as well. In closing, in all sincerity, I want to look you all in the eye and say thank you for what you do. I know how difficult it is, and although I know you have a big agenda tonight and a lot to do, in the future, if you have any questions about the electoral process, about elections, about polling places, feel free to give me a call. I'll be glad to answer any questions I can. And again, thank you for what you do, and thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and thank you for what you do as well. I'm sure it's not always an easy job either, so yeah, thank you. All right, so we also have another special recognition tonight of Miss Grace Deckard, our student representative. And I believe you have something, Ms. Horn?
I do. Thank you, Ms. Christie. So it is my honor to honor Grace tonight on behalf of the board. So I'm going to just give you guys a sense of her accomplishments over the past year. And of course, I know you'll expect this as a long list, so a very impressive list. Since tonight will be her last meeting as our Board of Education student representative, the board and Superintendent Reiswick wanted to take this opportunity to recognize Grace Deckard. Along with many other roles and responsibilities, Grace has been very dedicated to attending not only board meetings, but also student advisory council and student government meetings. She has responded to emails and student inquiries, and she's kept students informed via social media. Grace graduated from Hardin Valley Academy as valedictorian on May 26th with a 4.75 weighted GPA. During her senior year, she served as the state vice president of the Technology Student Association, an executive board member of the National Honor Society, state president of Mu Alpha Theta, a STEM ambassador, a Keeper ambassador, president of Hardin Valley Academy's Student Council, and on the leadership boards of Project U and Active Minds. Grace also participated with the Knox County Schools Gear Up for STEM Camp and the Hardin Valley Dance Team. In addition to being valedictorian, Grace earned a volunteer state seal of biliteracy by scoring a 3 or higher on the AP English Language Exam and the AP World Language Exam, and she also earned a 2022 AP Capstone Diploma. She is a 2022 AP Scholar with Distinction, a 2021 AP Scholar, and a member of the Technology Student Association chapter team that took first place in Tennessee and third place in the nation. She was one of 28 students selected for a week-long introduction to engineering camp at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. She was one of 15 students selected for an afternoon physics course while attending Tennessee Governor's School for Science and Engineering, and she was selected for an internship at the Joint Institute for Advanced Materials at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And on top of all of that, are you guys tired? On top of all of that, Grace is a part-time cashier at Publix. She tutors middle and high school students in math. She volunteers weekly in the nursery at her church, and she is certified in teen mental health first aid. What an impressive list of accomplishments, Grace. We're so proud of you. Every year, we all agree how hard it is to say goodbye to our student representative, and Grace is certainly no exception. You will always be remembered for your commitment to this board, to Knox County Schools, and the entire Knox County community. Please join me as we congratulate Grace and thank her for her service as our 2022-2023 Board of Education student representative.
right, well, regrettably, that's probably it for the really fun celebratory stuff. Down to business, Ms. Coatney. Yep. Is it on? No.
I will try to speak very loudly.
Is it not?
Item 8, consent agenda.
Hold on. Oh. So much for speaking clearly into your mic. Yeah, mine works.
Take a while. Oh, now it's working. Now it's working.
Item 8, consent agenda. There's a motion on the floor by Ms. Horn, seconded by Dr. Butler. Did you second it?
All right. So motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Reverend Butler. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9A, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy B100, Board Self-Evaluation as amended.
A motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9B, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy B180, Public Forum as amended.
So we have a motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Triplett, and we have public forum speakers. Ms. Henderson?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one public forum speaker for this item. Aaron Keck.
Good evening. I don't have a lot to say other than I just really hope that you guys do not further restrict the ability for us to sign up for public forum. As my friend Lance said earlier in the week, you know, he's someone that very much has his finger on the pulse of what's happening with Knox County schools, and even he was almost short of being able to sign up to speak to this item due to the late agenda being published. And if someone like Lance or myself has trouble with that, then the rest of the parents and community of Knox County schools probably also has trouble signing up a day before. So I just ask that you guys, if you're not able to allow us to sign up here before, if that poses some sort of risk, that you come up with a compromise or another way for us to phone in and call, maybe sign up out in the lobby. I think we could think outside the box and not further restrict our ability to come and talk. I hear all of you at some point saying that you appreciate and value community input, so I hope the vote will reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Reverend Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the reason why we are looking at the changes here for safety and security. But I agree that we need to have as much community input as possible. I know there were other ways, but there are some people in the community that do not communicate electronically, and also with the time frame of it coming out, and even with those who may look at the media, still have a struggle to get to sign up prior to. When I wasn't sitting on this side, it was more than one time that I signed up on the day of because of the way the information came out and the way that I was able to do that. So and then also with it being, the meeting being on Monday, if the meeting was on Tuesday, they would have a weekday to sign up, but you have 2 days prior to the meeting. So really the day that they have to sign up is on Friday. So this past time it came out on Thursday to the public, I understand. So really they only had 1 day to sign up, and I just don't think that that's fair to the public. I do think that the way this building is it does restrict us when we have a crowd. I mean, it's difficult. And I'm a big proponent on decency and order and security and safety. But I think there's a way that we can do it that we don't have to restrict that because the public pays the bills. The public are the ones who pay the bills. So I think it is important for us to do everything we can for them to come in. I do appreciate our security chief and his staff for being proactive and thinking this through. And so I'm not in disagreement with that sentiment. I just think that we should be able to do both and not or.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I completely agree with everything Reverend Butler said. I appreciate the sentiment behind this policy and the changes and everything our security does to keep the public safe, to keep us safe. But I do think that I do value the community input. I do think that we should keep government as open and transparent as possible. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I talked about this a little bit last time, so I'll be pretty brief. It was mentioned Monday that the agenda comes out on Wednesday, but I went back and looked through several of our past emails, and for at least the past 6 months, it has very consistently come out on Thursdays, sort of mid-morning. So in all that time, Thursday every time. So it's not that extra day that we sometimes think it is. And I think leaving it as is important. If we would like to have something that feels more secure, I think we need to consider meeting somewhere else.
Ms. Spike, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, bear with me. Well, I agree with everyone else. I've heard a lot from the community about access, and again, a lot of times people will be at work and cannot check their emails and stuff like that on regular business hours, so they don't see this. And then they have one day. So I think it's a great idea to maybe do something where, I also agree with the safety. If it's signing up in the lobby, if it's coming out with the agenda, at least a certain amount of days in advance to give people access, or some sort of day of sign up that we can do, I think the community would really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree with the comments that have been made, and I am open to discussing other logistical opportunities to prevent or to mitigate the security issues. I think the biggest issue that I've heard is people physically coming into this corral all at one time and talking to the board in order to get their name put onto the list. I mean, I think even some of that could happen logistically, where maybe there's a way to do that sign up physically out there, with somebody who then just brings the list up, right? I think there's lots of other possibilities. So I'm open to discussing those in the future, but I would agree that I think we need to be more open and not shut it down any further. I don't think it's as big of a concern on the regular voting meeting days, because we do have significantly more time, but a lot of people want to vote, or not vote, but come and speak on our work session days, because we're going to discuss in earnest that whole agenda on that day. So oftentimes, most of our discussion happens in the work session, which I think is where most people want to speak. And actually, when people ask me, when should I come speak, I always tell people to come to the work session, because I tell them, I'm like, that's the place where I feel like we're going to get the most discussion out. And so if you want to add your voice, that's where I would add it. So I agree. I don't think we need to change this yet, but I think it'd be worth discussing some logistical opportunities where people don't have to physically come into this corral to do the sign up the day of. So.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that this probably would be one that we would need Ms. Coatney's input on, and I think that maybe it would be wise for us to push this to policy review so that we can figure out what might be a compromise. I think it's important that if our security team is telling us of a concern, that we heed that. So I don't want to dismiss it. I think we need to figure out a way that we could perhaps accommodate both things. But since a lot of the workload and anything we might discuss goes to Ms. Coatney, and she's going to say that we should do whatever we want to do, but we all know that it will be her having to do that work. So I want to be cognizant of that, and I feel like we need to maybe take a step back and think through this a little bit more. So Mr. Triplett may want to speak, but I would say that we probably need to just make a motion to push it to policy review.
I'd be comfortable with that as well. The only thing I thought of was, I think the key is giving people the weekend to have time to look it over, think about it. So I'm wondering, Ms. Coatney, again, I know you'll say everything's fine, do whatever, but what challenges would it be if we just said noon the day of? You haven't left the building yet to come over here, so it wouldn't be an issue there. Would that be a simple compromise that would eliminate the corral issue, but would still give people time the weekend to look over that policy?
Dr. Butler?
Well, I would make a motion, or I move that we send it back to policy review, and we can discuss those kind of issues.
Mr. Deepler?
So we've got a motion on the floor, so that's going to have to be dealt with. The other thing is, what I'm hearing is the issue is the optional change in line 16, 17, 18. Problem with pushing it back to policy review for the board is that there's a state law change that goes into effect July 1st. So, and the rest of the changes to this policy are around that state law change. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Good point. Mr. Triplett?
So then can we do a substitute motion to change everything but lines 16, 17, and 18? Would that make us compliant? Yeah, I make that substitute motion and then push everything else back to policy. Put 16, 17, and 18 back on policy review.
If we were...
Point of order.
Yes.
Reverend Butler, I think, made a substitute motion, and it was seconded. So I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just saying I think there's already a substitute motion on the floor.
Well,
if it's offered as a friendly amendment, I'd be glad.
You were offering as a friendly amendment?
I would. No, he would offer it as a friendly.
I'll offer that as a friendly amendment.
To your substitute.
To pushing it back instead of, we'll keep everything but 16, 17, and 18. Those lines will go back to policy review.
Friendly amendment to a substitute.
It'd be easier to withdraw the substitute and friendly amendment to the original motion. Just saying.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Mr. Deepler, do we need to withdraw the? You can make.
I withdraw the motion.
Thank you.
Then I'll make a substitute motion that we
Okay.
approve the policy other than lines, whatever that is, 15, that one paragraph.
15,
and
15
we
through
send that back to
19.
policy review for further discussion.
Ms. Coatney, do we have that?
So I second.
So we have a substitute motion by Mr. Triplett and a second by Reverend Butler. Okay. Ms. Horn? Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question for the Law Department. Looking at line 9 about public comment at work sessions, called meetings, and other special meetings, are we required to have public forum at called meetings and special meetings?
Yes.
Is that the new one? Okay.
The way I read the new law is that if there's an action to be taken, then certainly that would be the case for special meetings, and usually called meetings, special meetings can be the same thing sometimes. But yes, if there's any action to be taken, any voting, public forum has to occur. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the motion on the floor the substitute motion by Mr. Triplett is to approve all changes to this policy with the exceptions of lines 16 through 18 on page 1. And that was seconded by Ms. Horn.
Is that correct? All right. Reverend Butler?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, we'll do a roll call.
Dr. Butler?
Yes.
Ms. Owen? Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Bike?
Yes.
Ms. Horn? Yes. Ms. Henderson? Yes. Mr. Triplett?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan? Yes. And Ms. Christie?
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes and no votes.
All right, motion carries.
Item 9C, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy C-123, Director of Schools Duties as amended.
I'd like to make a motion to send this back to policy review as well.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Owen to send back to policy review and a second by Reverend Butler. So discussion on that. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the more I look at this, the more questions I have about it, and I think it's going to take some time to hammer out. So we've looked at this policy a lot over the past several years, but we've changed very tiny little pieces of it, nothing really significant. In line 10, it says the superintendent supervises all administrative and supervisory personnel in the district. And the change that we're making says that he supervises all personnel in the district. And while the superintendent does have authority over all personnel in the district, if we change his job duty to say that he is the supervisor of all personnel in the district, it seems to me that we are going to have 9,000 people reporting directly to the superintendent. And that could be an issue if he starts getting 9,000 phone calls. So I think that's something we need to really carefully consider. If we're looking at that chain of authority that we have in other policies, this is going to really work in opposition, I think, to what we would expect. So I think we need to look at that. We had talked previously when we were doing superintendent search about what should really be in the qualifications and whether the qualifications, well, really where they should be. And these were pulled out as qualifications during a search. So having the qualifications in with his duties, I think it's going to make it confusing and difficult to find. If we are talking about qualifications of a person that we are about to hire, I think that's not something we want in with the duties. That needs to be somewhere else. The other thing, and I'll ask Mr. Dupler to address this in a minute, we're changing that to say a master's degree in education, and I believe what we discussed before, and the reason I remember this is because I wanted it to say master's degree. What we were advised previously is that the law says a minimum of a bachelor's degree, and so we were trying to make it compliant with what the law says. And I have some other questions. It says that it came from TSBA model policy language. Did we get this? Did we call TSBA and get an actual copy of their actual model policy, or did we take this from what we've gleaned online from other districts?
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Yes, we did contact TSBA for a copy of their actual model policy. They were very gracious in sharing that, but did let us know that if we would like any other previews of model policies, we would need to subscribe to their services.
Right. I think that would be wise. And have I forgotten, have we seen that model policy against this one? Did we have that in policy review?
We did not have it at the time of policy review. At that time, I think we were still talking about whether or not we wanted to move the language into this space. So if I recall correctly, you all had versions of the model policy language, but it was looked at through the lens of maybe 5 or 6 other districts.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I think it would be really wise of us to look at the actual model policy since we have it, and we're not just guessing at it, and compare that policy language to what we have here and think about all the other policies that are going to be impacted by it and look at those before we actually bring this to a vote. Thank you. Mr. Dupler, I forgot to ask you to talk about the master's, bachelor's thing.
I can, Ms. Owen, I mean, simply, as I think you alluded to, TCA simply requires a bachelor's degree for directors of schools, AKA superintendents. And that's likely because there's different needs and different requirements for different districts, different sizes, things of that nature. But that remains the minimum requirement, is a bachelor's degree.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On line 10, I actually did have a question for, maybe Mr. Bolton would be the best to answer it. And it's really because, to me, it's an HR question. In line 10, it currently says supervises all administrative and supervisory personnel in the district. And if we remove administrative and supervisor, and it just says supervises all personnel in the district, from an HR standpoint, what's the definition of supervising? Because the way I would read it is I would read it the way Ms. Horn does. Like, I don't really believe that the superintendent does supervise all personnel in the district. And so if that's what we're saying in policy, to me, that would be a problem, unless from an HR standpoint, he does supervise all employees in the district. But I don't know from a technical standpoint how that plays out, so.
It's all semantics, really.
Yeah.
Board Chair, rest of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I really think it depends. So when you're looking at the terms of directing the scope of work and duties, there is a bureaucracy that is applied to it. So there is a level of management that's there. So he may not supervise as a directly, but he does have overview and oversight of that supervisory strata. So I don't think I would have any preference one way or the other. I mean, there are times when there may be some disciplinary actions and such that the superintendent would sign that would not be something that would be his direct report, if that makes sense. So I have no issue with it really either way.
Yeah. Ms. Simmelgarn, do you have any issue with it being removed from a technical standpoint?
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson, no. The superintendent is the ultimate personnel decision maker in the district.
All right.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we have a substitute motion on the floor by Ms. Owen to withdraw this and send it to policy review, and a second by Reverend Butler. Right. There was no motion to approve. Just a motion to withdraw. All right, so want to do a roll call?
Sure. So the motion on the floor was to send this policy back to the policy review process, and it was seconded by Dr. Butler. Dr. Butler?
Yes.
Ms. Owen? Yes. Mr. Watson?
No.
Ms. Bike?
Yes.
Ms. Horn? No. Ms. Henderson? No. Mr. Triplett? No. Mr. McMillan? No. Ms. Christie?
No.
That is 3 yes votes and 6 no votes.
All right, so that motion fails. All right, so we have no motion on the floor currently.
So now we need a motion to approve board policy C-123, right? So I make that motion.
The public forum speaker was on the administrative and supervisory.
Shelley, are you here, Shelley? Do you want to go ahead and speak on this? I know you put 9E, this one and 9E are pretty similar. Do you want to go ahead and speak now? Okay.
I can reach it.
I know they're kind of
Short people.
they're kind of related.
Is there?
Yeah.
I'm okay like that, I just.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
As
This
a
is
fellow
nice.
short person, yes, I understand.
Yes. Okay. My name is Shelley Higgins, and I just wanted to thank you all for allowing me to address you this evening, and I'm really grateful that I was able to be here and sign up this evening because I didn't find out about this item until I saw that it was published in a news story today. So thank you all very much for that. But I did want to talk a minute about some of the proposed changes regarding this item, where the board would be allowing the administration central office to, I need to take my glasses off, sorry, have it over the supervisory positions and qualifications. And I totally understand the rationale of why that's great. I remember seeing where it was about like efficiency and things like that. But one of the things that I would respectfully ask the board to consider is basically how that looks and the accountability to the public in general, because one of the vital things is that trust. I mean, that's been spoken here this evening, even by board members saying that they valued and, the community input and trust. And the members who are here, you were elected by the voters and the taxpayers. And while it may seem more simple to do things like that, there's kind of a contract that if the voters have put their faith to elect you and you are serving, then it's important to have that accountability and that checks and balances in place. And it doesn't matter how well we may like somebody who is in a position in the office to make those decisions. It's not a good look to basically hand over that's a lot of power. And there's a lot of new faces here, but for some, you may remember, it's not even been quite 10 years, but we had this issue come up where there were positions filled and things made without knowledge of the board. And the board actually kind of had to go back and forgive that. And we would hate to see that happen again. That was a period of great distrust. There was not transparency. And even if it was not intentional, even now, like we've had all this reorganizing and that requires that, that's even more important to make sure that we have the checks and the balances. Because if the board members here, as they've said, that they really do value community input, the voters' input, the taxpayers' input, then even if it's inconvenient at times, that accountability is crucial. And so I would just ask that you think about that and that you consider that. And for those of you who've been here for a while, you think back, a few years ago, and some of the issues and problems that caused. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to apologize to Ms. Higgins because I thought this was the one she was speaking on today. So I may have confused things there. So apologies to Ms. Higgins and the board that I thought that was the one she wanted to speak on.
All right. So we have a motion to approve the policy as amended by Mr. Triplett and a second by Mr. McMillan. Correct? Ms. Coatney, you want to do a roll call?
Dr. Butler?
No.
Ms. Owen? No. Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Bike?
No.
Ms. Horn? Yes. Ms. Henderson? Yes. Mr. Triplett? Yes. Mr. McMillan? Yes. Ms. Christie?
Yes.
That is 6 yes votes and 3 no votes.
So motion carries.
Item 9D, approve first reading to rescind Knox County Board of Education Policy C-121, Director of Schools Qualifications and Selection.
So motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it might be wise for us to keep this until the other policy has been fully adopted. We don't want to get one rescinded before the other one is fully adopted.
Mr. Dupler, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Owen, as I understand it, both proposals are on first reading, so if one's adopted on second reading, then I agree that the other one would need to be simultaneously adopted on second reading. But I mean, that's kind of where it lies now, but if that were to get out of order, then Ms. Owen does have a point, yes.
But as it is, if they're both on second reading, it would be, okay.
Yes.
All right. Ms. Coatney?
So that motion was made by Ms. Horn and seconded by Mr. Triplett.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to do a roll call on that one as well?
Do we need a roll call? Yes, let's do a roll call.
Dr. Butler? Ms. Owen? Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Bike?
Pass.
Ms. Horn? Ms. Henderson? Mr. Triplett? Mr. McMillan? Ms. Christie?
Yes.
That is 6 yes votes, 2 no votes, and 1 pass. Ms. Bike, did you want to change your pass vote? No. Thank you. So that's 6, 2, and 1.
Okay. So motion carries.
Item 9E, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy C-132, Administrative and Supervisory Position and Qualifications as amended, with change of descriptor code to G-181.
Motion by Mr. Triplett, a second by Ms. Horn. Discussion, Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to strongly caution against taking out these 3 lines. This is a piece of accountability that we really can't afford to lose. This is the one place, the one time when we have oversight of the potential ballooning of central office. We have oversight of ensuring that big government doesn't become really big at the top. And this is something that's necessary for us to do to be accountable to the public. When we put this piece, when we bury this in a budget that's as large as our budget, it's very hard to tell how many additional positions we have, especially when we are talking about high-level positions. If we move on down through the G policies, we have very clear definitions of what administrative positions and supervisory positions are. And those are not just positions that are going to come up spur of the moment. We need an extra teacher because we have so many more students who have moved in. These are not positions that have any reason to be needed suddenly when there's not time for the board to vote. This is the kind of thing that takes planning and foresight, and this is something that we should have oversight of. This is something that we have had oversight of, and it doesn't make sense to me to just give up our oversight of, it's really the fiscal management. And if we look back throughout this past year, if you look really carefully, you may find about $300,000 that you weren't aware of. It's too easy for this to happen and have larger and larger and larger administration. It's far too easy when we bury it in the budget. We are not fiscal experts. We are not budget experts. We are not auditors. And the idea that we are just going to recognize additional positions in that budget when they are not presented to us clearly, I think that's just nonsensical. The public has a right to have us manage their funds, and they have a right to know if central office is getting larger. They have a right to not have to question whether it's true or not. They have a right to not have to wonder. And if it is getting larger, they have a right to blame us. So it's our responsibility to know that and to vote on that. And for that blame, if that's what happens, to be on us in the future, or whatever board it is in the future. I don't think the public should have to question whether something is happening. It should be clear, it should be transparent, it should be completely open, and right here in public, if we are adding high-level, high-paid positions, everyone should be completely aware of that. There's no reason for burying that in a budget. Thank you.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can somebody tell me what administrative and supervisory positions would be for Knox County Schools? Is it simply limited to central office, or are the definitions broader than that?
Ms. Himmelgarn, can you?
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson, the administrative and supervisory positions I don't think would be limited to just central office. There's some system-wide, and then our principals, our school administration would be administrators. We do have, like Ms. Owen said, we do have a policy that defines some of our personnel classes, one of those being supervisors. So our supervisors could be, and we proposed some changes to that definition at policy review. I think it'll be back on next time. But generally, supervisors would be considered supervisors of people or programs, so curriculum or other type of programs, and then administrators could be school administration, and then there's central office administration too. So that was a longer answer. Short answer, no, not just in central office.
Okay, thank you. And I know I brought this up when we discussed this in policy review. I have a lot of problem with the word initially there because I don't really know what it means. Is it initially at the beginning of a school calendar year, a budget cycle, in all of time? I don't know what initially means. So, and being on the board now almost 3 years, outside of approving the budget, has there been any mechanism? Because I don't remember voting on specific administrative and supervisory positions. Maybe I have, but my memory's not what it used to be either. Outside of voting on a budget, what's the the current mechanism as this policy stands for us to approve new administrative and supervisory positions initially? Because it's been in policy for some time, so it would seem like if it was happening outside the budget approval process, there would have been a mechanism for it.
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson, I don't think I'm the keeper of the complete answer, depending on where the position may live, but there have been some positions approved as board agenda items outside of the budget in the past several years.
Okay.
The Title IX coordinator would be one of them.
Okay.
That I remember most
recently. I do remember that now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's helpful. So on a limited basis, from time to time, over the last few years, we've had specific new positions to the system that would have been brought to the board for approval for the position itself, not the hiring of the individual, correct? Title IX coordinator being an example of one
and
of them.
I would call that the exception. I think most are as part of a new budget cycle.
So at the same time that we've had a few come, there's been others, new positions that have been creative, administrative or supervisory, that we did not vote on over the last few years. Is that true? The reason I'm asking these questions is we have a policy that I don't really know how it's supposed to be implemented, and it seems like maybe it's up for interpretation. And to me, that's what we don't want in our policy, is we don't want it to be up for I don't want it to be up for interpretation. I would assume the administration doesn't want it to be up for interpretation. So that's why I'm trying to get clarity. I'm not asking these questions to express fault in anything that's happened. I'm trying to understand, how have we been doing this up until this time? Because it seems like it's different depending on the position.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Watson. I would say this. I mean, I can't speak to historics
Sure.
outside of my last year, right?
Right.
But I would say that, like in this budget cycle we just went through, in the one-on-one conversations we had with you all, and then even in the, we laid out, Joe and Joni and Ron did a good job of laying out positional changes. They even showed unbudgeted positions such as like the ELL and the SPED that were required by law to add. So if you remember that section, those are the ones that were added last year based on those reasons, and then any other new positions were posted in the budget to be, so that's how we did it this past year.
But most of those were more of the same position. They weren't actually brand-new positions, right?
Correct.
Because this policy doesn't speak to more of the same. It speaks to brand-new positions. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll say this, some could be new positions. Like an example of that would be this year, the ELL, for the Family Student Support Center, like we had the ELL facilitator.
But the majority of the ones that you brought up in the budget when we met with the team were more of existing positions.
Correct.
We're just getting more of them, right? Okay. The way, if we remove the red line, the way I read the former policy is that line 6, where it says in each case, that the function of us approving those administrative and supervisory positions, the way we do it is through the approval of the board. Or through the budget, or is that completely new? Because
That's new.
so right now, the current policy, again, if you remove the red, it actually doesn't say how we approve it. There is no mechanism for the approval defined in policy. Well, it says it's constrained by the budget, but to me, all that's saying is we can't approve things that we can't fund, but it doesn't talk about a specific mechanism to make the actual approval.
We don't have that for anything else we do either, though.
What's that? Well, I guess, Ms. Owen, what I'm trying to get clarity on is, and I understand your concern, I completely understand your concern, but I'm asking if we leave this as is, we leave those 3 lines, what are you suggesting would be the mechanism outside of the budget? Because what I hear you saying is you don't think approving it within the budget is enough. And so I'm trying to imagine, like, I don't think any of us every month want to, not that we need to add supervisor and administrative positions every month, but I just don't think that is our role to like formally vote on each individual one. So I'm trying to understand what would be the mechanism outside the budget, because it's not clearly defined in current policy.
Okay, it would be the same mechanism as we have for approving everything else. It would be through a vote of this board. And I want to word this very carefully to be very clear that what I'm about to say is no fault of anyone sitting in this room. When at the beginning of this year, we were looking at some job duties, some job descriptions. If we look at the job descriptions, we are also supposed to be approving the job descriptions for these positions. And when I was looking at job descriptions, I believe what was found was that the job descriptions were, they had not been updated, they were not consistent. Many of them had not been created as far as I understood, and that is no one in this room's fault. It's just over time, that's a big old ball that had been dropped. So it's something that if we're not looking at it, because obviously we haven't been, then that just goes further and further along, not keeping with what is actually state law, is that we are supposed to have on file current and accurate job descriptions for every position. And I would also say that a new position is a new position. It doesn't matter if there are already 5 of them. If you create another one, that's another one. It's a new one. So it's not creating titles. It's creating a position that is funded. It's not people. It's a position that is funded, and it's initially created when it is first created. So if you have 4 and you want to create a new one, when you create it, it's been initially created. It is new. Just like initial is at the beginning. So when that is created, if you have 5 positions that are similar and you have another one, you could give that the same job description. Or you could say, this one is very similar, but it needs a different job description. And that's when that approval process would all come to us, just like a contract, just like an MOU, just like building a school. All of those pieces that come before us, we don't have a lengthy list of here's how it happens. It happens by being put on an agenda and approved. If someone wants to do something, it comes on the agenda, and we say, sure, we like that idea, do it. That would be how it would be approved, the same way as everything else. It would be approved through a vote of the board transparently so that the public knows we're doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. I appreciate, I'm sorry, do I still have the floor? I don't know. I asked her a question, so I don't know if I still have the floor or not. No, it's all good. It was a long answer, but it's all good. So, no, I appreciate the additional clarity on where your concern is and where you think the opportunities are. When you started your comments by saying you don't think we should remove lines 2 through 4, I actually think if you just leave those in there, I don't think it actually addresses your concern, because later in the policy, when it adds the language that the mechanism is through the approval of the budget. And also, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I'm having a lot of problems with the semantics of this, because in good faith, I can read this policy about 3 different ways. I mean, I can interpret this a number of different ways, and I can make a good justification for why I'm doing it. So I would make a substitute motion that we take this back to policy review, because I do think it needs new work. And I'm happy to go to the table to help try to figure out a way for us to not create central office bloat. And I do think that is a concern of folks, and I think we probably need to figure out how to do that. I think leaving these 3 lines in, actually, I don't know that it really helps us or hurts us on that issue. I think there's some work that needs to be done in this policy. So that would be my substitute motion, is to push it back to policy review for further discussion.
Okay, we have a substitute motion to send this back to policy review by Mr. Watson, a second by Reverend Butler. Mr. Triplett.
I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Watson. I do think it is confusing. That first 3 lines doesn't give me any real clarity. I do think the amended, those new red line on 6 through 10 there is more clear in what it says, because it's through the approval of the budget. The question I had about the Title IX, was that a change in budget? Is that why we had to bring that one to the table? Like, do we have to change money from in some way, or was that just an approval of the position?
Madam Chair, Mr. Triplett, I would have to go back and review. I think the reason it was on the board's agenda is because it was outside of the budget cycle. So it was approved outside of, like, when we would have the meetings and say that this position's going to be created.
In my mind, if that's the case, then if he is stepping outside the budget and, you know, those approved positions, like if that Title IX comes in and now he's got to take funds from somewhere and, in my mind, bloat central office, if we thought it was that, he or she would have to bring that to the board to change that fund designation, which would give us the opportunity to say, hey, we don't feel like this is a worthy, you know, we don't want those funds to bloat central office, so we're going to ask that you not do that, and we'll vote against it. So to me, I feel like through the approval of the budget, and then they, you know, central office has to bring that to us. The superintendent has to bring that to us if he wants to make changes to that budget by adding positions. Then we have that opportunity to turn it down. So I don't know that I'm comfortable with the policy as is. No, I am. I am comfortable. I'm comfortable with it the way we have it amended. I feel like we still have the measure of control that we need over central office and the risk. And I can appreciate the concern for the risk. I mean, I totally understand that. But I think the budget gives us that supervision over that.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just say this too with my comments. I very much believe that we're in the role of governance on the board, and I don't think our role is day-to-day management. And I think that's a fine line to walk. And I've seen organizations pendulum one way or the other, especially with an organization this size. But an organization this size is a public institution as well. So I think there is balance there. And I do think day-to-day our greatest opportunity to affect what happens in the district is through policy and through budget. I mean, that's our 2 big levers. And I don't want us to get into the weeds where, you know, we're having to approve every individual position. I do appreciate Ms. Owen's concerns, and I don't think she's suggesting that we approve each and every individual position. But to me, this particular policy does have a lot. There's just not very much clarity in my mind, and it could be interpreted different ways. And I think that's part of the frustration is that I think there's probably a view that maybe we haven't been consistent, but I think some of the inconsistency might be because of the way people view the policy. So.
Reverend Butler?
Yes, and I'm struggling with the not just this policy, but the others that we have voted on, and I'm thinking again that it has something to do with our most recent changes that was made before I came on the board. But I came on the board, and I call it the region plan, and the differences that was made. And that's the piece I think that that our public speaker, as I was listening, was alluding to, is that we had changes in the way that we do school. And it wasn't discussed publicly. It wasn't talked about that the public could understand. And a lot of folk are still catching up with it. So, so in my mind, I think that we need to have policies. Now, what I'm looking at, the one we're on right now, that we are looking at this from the perspective of that we are going to approve through the budget. So if it's not before the budget cycle, then it wouldn't happen. So if I'm reading this correctly, the superintendent has the authority to make changes to organize and reorganize central office, which he did, but it wasn't in the budget cycle. It never did go through a budget approval. It was in place, and then the budget was made to address it. Am I wrong? I mean, we got to go here. we got to go here. You know, this is what this is really about. So let's just go there.
Well, I guess it's a matter of perspective, right? I mean,
well, and I'm not trying to dig up old bones. We resolved that. I'm just saying, does this policy address the board having responsibility? Because we can delegate authority, but we do not delegate responsibility. So this board having responsibility to the folk who elected us to ensure that we're going to have the responsibility of ensuring that they understand what is going, how we're doing school. And that's the piece that has bothered me with all of the change we've made, is that we maintain the authority that we are responsible for. That but we don't handcuff the superintendent and not being able to do the superintendent's or the director of schools' job. We have to make sure that the director of schools has the latitude and the flexibility to do the job throughout the year. And I think that's the struggle, quite honestly, I'm having, is as a board member, I have the responsibility to those who elected me to make sure that we do the things, and I'm just one of 9, I understand that, to make sure that we do the things that we're responsible for, but also the superintendent have the latitude. And I'm just not comfortable that the policies read that way yet. I think we've done some good work to do that, but I just don't think we're there yet. So that's why I want to vote for them to go back to, because all of these are connected. To do away with one, you got to put something in the other one and those kind of things. And so I think we need to really take this time to painfully go through and come up with what we're going to need, that we all are, we can live up to our responsibility, but also not handcuff the superintendent. I don't want to vote for something that's going to handcuff the superintendent, but I don't want to also vote for something that we don't live up to our responsibility. And that's my struggle, quite honestly.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that
Horn, I don't think you've spoken on this yet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reverend Butler, I appreciate your comments, and I think that it is important that we are taking that responsibility seriously. I'm comfortable with this saying that we approve these through the approval of the budget, and here's why. I'm envisioning that if we have the superintendent who is wanting to reorganize within the existing budget, but brings us an org chart that's outside of what we have currently, that then we have 9 people weighing in on an organizational chart when we've employed one person to have the vision to do that. So I think that we really get into micromanaging those positions and the vision and the intent when, if we all were weighing in on the structure that we've already approved a budget that supports. If it's outside of budget, that's completely different. But if it is within the budget constraints that we have voted on, then I think we need to be really careful about not micromanaging and hindering the vision and the forward progress of the organization. And so I would really caution us against passing a policy that would do that.
Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the Law Department. Looking at lines 6 through 10 with the changes that we are considering, it seems to me that what this says is that the only time any kind of additional positions could be approved would be in that budget cycle, because it said that we would approve the broad purpose and function of each position as recommended by the Director of Schools through the approval of the budget. So if that is the language that we adopt, would he be able to create positions at any other time of the year? We wouldn't. Yeah. We still could.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Owen. That's a good question. And what I would say is that, the way it reads is that certainly a position or positions could be approved through the budget. But if there was a budgetary effect by creating a new position, then that would need to be brought specifically before the board. I mean, it doesn't, because that's already the case. If there's a budgetary effect, for instance, if there's a contract that is approved by the board, and then all of a sudden, we're going to go over budget, there's going to be more money involved, then that needs to be brought back before the board. So I would envision, the same type of thing here. If it's not during the budget cycle, then it would have to be, a new position would have to be brought specifically before the board.
Even though we're taking out the language that says that could happen?
Well, I'm just telling you that as a practical matter, that's the way it would have to happen, because, that's the way the budget is. Now, the question is, I think more importantly, what you're asking is, what if you create a new position, but there's no budgetary impact? Then perhaps it wouldn't be brought before the board with this new language.
So you're saying that even if there was no budgetary impact, because it's not at budget time, it would still have to be brought to the board? Because this is saying that we only approve them through the budget, through approval of the budget. So that sounds to me like we could only approve positions through that budget.
Well, it doesn't say only, it says through the approval of the budget.
Right.
Yep. So, but again, I think you could bring you could still bring a position before the board outside of budget time if there's a budgetary impact. Again, my question would be, with this new language, the way I interpret it legally is that if there's no change on the budget, then there wouldn't be a need to bring that position before the board.
would it be a change in the overall budget or a change in line items?
This isn't that specific.
So how would one know?
I'm just saying, it's not, so.
Mr. Triplett.
To answer, I think, Mr. Butler's question, my understanding is the moves that were made were budget neutral. Is that correct? From the central office? So they didn't affect the budget per se on those moves. I know, Mr. Watson, you talked about sending it back to policy review, and I can appreciate that. I feel like we've been through policy review it's been there 3 times, I think, something like that. We've talked about it. And I don't know any other method to hold them accountable than through this method of through the budget. And as a matter of fact, I feel like it gives us kind of greater, he gives him or her the greater accountability in the sense that if we give the superintendent the freedom within the budget to organize and reorganize and make changes and be creative and run with their ideas to improve Knox County schools, then we can hold him or her accountable for that. If every single move has to be discussed, by this board, every org chart has to be looked at, and we have to say, no, I don't think that's a good idea, then we have tied the hands of whoever it is that we hire into that position, and don't give them the freedom to do their job well, then really they're not accountable for what happens. We are, and I know ultimately we are, but we can't even hold that individual accountable because we've given them no freedom to do their job. And so I'm still comfortable with the policy as is, and I think we just pass it as is.
Ms. Helen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Triplett, my questions to the law department are because I'm agreeing with you. I think what this language does is exactly what you're trying to avoid, because the new language constrains all positions. It's not just constraining supervisory and administrative positions. It's saying that the board shall approve the broad purpose and function of each position as recommended by the director of schools. So we would have to approve the broad purpose and function of each position that's created, and we would have to do it at budget time. Anything that he wanted to change, it says he can organize and reorganize, but if he organizes and reorganizes and changes the purpose and function, then that's something that this says he cannot do. So I think we're doing a couple of things. We are taking out our oversight of the administrative and supervisory positions, but we're also tying his hands on all positions. I think this is just a wreck of language because it's been brought in from several different policies, and really what has been suggested all year is that we need to look at all of them as a whole. When we're looking at just one and we're picking this piece and that piece and we're not looking at them as a whole, that's where the problems lie. It's that we don't have enough cross-reference to be able to see how each one is impacting. But looking at this one alone, we're taking out our oversight of the administrative and supervisory positions, and at the same time completely tying his hands regarding all other positions that he could be able to create. That doesn't seem wise, because all of those other positions are positions that could come up that he might need to create in between times, and that would make sense. I think this is just very problematic language that needs some lengthy look.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What's interesting, and maybe this is kind of my point, is, Ms. Owen, the way you describe the way you read that is not the way that I read that. The way that I read that section is that the way that approval happens is through the approval of the budget, that it's not a separate act on behalf of the board. And I'm not suggesting that it should be a separate act, but what I'm saying is I think I don't think there's a tremendous amount of clarity because of the particular issues that we've been raising. Different folks have different concerns, and I don't know that all of those concerns are addressed in the way that it currently is. I mean, I do agree, Mr. Triplett, that day to day, I think the way what I've always heard is that your budget is your strategy, right? And that by approving a budget, and it's what happens in my organization, my board approves the budget that I have to operate, but they're also not telling me that I can't hire a housing coordinator, or I do have to hire a family advocate or whatever. What they're telling me is, the mission and vision of this organization, and we expect you to accomplish that mission and vision with these amount of dollars. Now figure it out, right? Now my entity is a little bit different in that I'm not a public entity, right? And I get that. Although my 990s are public because I'm a 501c3, but I'm not publicly funded. And so, I mean, I completely get what you're saying. I think part of the challenge, and I think at least this is some of what I hear Ms. Owen saying, is at an organization this scale, it is way easier to hide things in a budget than it is in an organization my scale. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I'm hearing everybody around the table, and I'm like, I'm getting it. I just, I think it's a pretty tough nut to crack. And I know we've been looking at this for a while, but I still think we can make some improvements on this to make it clearer, so.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think part of the language problem comes from all of the different places this language has come from. And the reason it's confusing is because lines 6 through 10 don't come from anything about administrative and supervisory positions and qualifications. Where it comes from is the job descriptions policy, because that is how the job description policy begins. So when we're looking at what should be a paragraph explaining what we're supposed to do with job descriptions, but it's stuck over here in administrative and supervisory positions and qualifications, it's confusing to how to read that because it's not in context. It's just a paragraph pulled out here under something completely different. So that's why I would support moving this back to policy review, because if we keep it as it is, it's more confusing than it was to begin with. And it was pretty bad to begin with. So, I would really support taking all of these questionable policies that work together, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, administrative and supervisory positions, if we just go and look through our policies for that, we're going to find about 30. So we need to make sure that we are using language that makes sense throughout those and that it's consistent throughout those, instead of picking and choosing one here and one there, because it's getting more confusing instead of less confusing.
Ms. Lautner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Owen, I just wanted to point out that you are correct, and you raised something that Terry and I spoke about at the end of our meeting on Monday. I think that there was one red line revision that slipped through the cracks from policy review to this meeting. So when we met at policy review, the conversation that was had was that this was the language that had been taken from the job descriptions policy. So if I'm recalling correctly, I believe that part of the board's request to move this policy to the G policy section was also to retitle the policy as a job descriptions policy, because over the course of discussion, I believe the administrative and supervisory lines at the top of this policy were additions after the original policy was created. So I just wanted to add that layer because that was an error on our part, that we let the retitling slip through the cracks, and that was a request from the board. We were just hoping to pick that one up at the next policy review cycle, so I apologize for that. All of the other changes are correct. It was really just that last change to change the title in addition to the code.
Okay. So we have a substitute motion on the floor by Mr. Watson. to send this to policy review, and a second by Reverend Butler. So I guess we will need to, no more discussion on that. Ms. Coatney, do a roll call vote, I guess.
Mr. Watson made a motion to defer this policy back to the policy review process, and it was seconded by Dr. Butler.
It was a substitute motion.
Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Owen. It was a substitute motion because there was a motion to approve on the floor. Dr. Butler? Yes. Ms. Owen? Yes. Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Bike?
Yes.
Ms. Horn? No. Ms. Henderson? No. Mr. Triplett? No. Mr. McMillan? No. Ms. Christie?
No.
That's 4 yes votes and 5 no votes.
Okay. So that fails, so we are back to our original motion, correct? Which was made, I believe, by, let me look back, it's Mr. Triplett and seconded by Ms. Horn, correct? Any discussion on that, Ms. Horn? Mr. Triplett, you. Go ahead, Mr. Triplett.
I'd like to amend my motion to go ahead and change the title based on, what's job descriptions, is that correct? That was, we had agreed on? Yes.
And I'll second that since I seconded the original motion.
So approve it based on, along with the change.
So we are amending it to, for the title to be labeled, Ms. Lautner.
181, job description.
Job description.
That was the original
Okay.
discussion.
And you accept that amendment. All right, Ms. Owen?
Okay, so do I correctly understand that we're voting on a policy that's on our agenda that's not correctly redlined so the public can't see what we actually are trying to do?
I believe we are changing the title, right? And everything
Right,
else.
so are you
we
saying
are
that this
keeping-
should have come to us redlined with job descriptions there instead? Or, I'm very confused, and I assume the public is too.
So the amended motion is to change the title, keep everything else the same. Is this correct, Mr. Triplett, Ms. Horn? And you are, the title will be labeled, it will be titled Job Descriptions, and it will be moved to the G, which is already redlined. Is that correct, just to be clear? All right, so that is the amended motion. All right, Ms. Coatney?
Dr. Butler? No. Ms. Owen? No. Mr. Watson?
No.
Ms. Bike?
Pass.
Ms. Horn? Yes. Ms. Henderson? Yes. Mr. Triplett? Yes. Mr. McMillan? Yes. Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Bike, would you like to change your pass vote? That's 5 yes votes, 3 no votes, and 1 pass.
So motion carries.
Item 9F, approve first reading of new Knox County Board of Education Policy C-260, sexual harassment and sex-based discrimination.
Motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can someone just speak to the need for this policy and why it's a new one?
Ms. Himmelgarn, is that you?
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson, the policy on sexual harassment is required by federal regulations.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9G, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G-320, Tuition Assistance Program as amended.
So motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9H, approve first reading of new Knox County Board of Education Policy G467, parental leave.
So motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Mr. Watson. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just note for the public that this is due to a change in law.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9I, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G590, leaves and absences of classified personnel as amended.
Motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Triplett. Discussion. All in favor? Ms. Owen?
Sorry, I was just going to say the same thing, due to a change in law.
Oh, okay. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9J, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-122, course credit earned outside the base high school as amended.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson, and I believe we have a public forum speaker.
Yes, Madam Chair. Michael Shop, did I get your last name correct? Shope, I'm so sorry. Just state your name, county of residence, and you have 3 minutes. And welcome.
Thank you. My name is Michael Shope. I'm a Knox County resident, Knoxville native. I've had the pleasure the last few years of serving on a board for an entity in Campbell County that offers a release time education course according to the policy passed by that LEA, and this would create a similar policy for Knox County. Am I able to take questions or just speak? Okay. But I won't leave any time for questions, I guess. I don't think I'll take 3 minutes. Release time education is a constitutional right, and that's been confirmed by the Supreme Court in a case in 1952. What this policy would do, in accordance with a recently amended Tennessee state law, is offer one elective credit for such a course, so long as it meets certain requirements of that statute. There are some benefits that I'd like to point out, and I think for the most part the policy speaks for itself, but what we've seen in Campbell County and what we hope to see in Knox County are the results that we've seen in the students that have taken these classes. They have better academic performance on average after they've taken these classes. They're receiving moral instruction during the school day, and we have a tendency to focus solely on our mind and our body in the school system, and that's the place of the school system, but it tends to cause us to ignore the spiritual needs of students who spend the majority of their waking hours in a school building, outside the supervision of their parents and under the supervision of the state. And a policy like this would allow parents to direct the education of their kids in a way that part of their daily life revolves around their spiritual health and their spiritual development and their moral development. And so there's also resources saved by the school when programs like this are in place, because private funding provides for these programs, and so that cuts down on class sizes, and so education is being provided by private entities at no cost to the state or the taxpayer. I really wish I could answer questions, but I understand that that's not how this works, so I apologize for not understanding the procedure. I'm not sure what else I'd like to cover. I think the policy speaks for itself, but the amendment that passed in the General Assembly this session increased the credit to be offered from half a credit to a full credit, and I want to be clear that these courses are legal to be offered at no credit, at any time, and I think there are examples of that across the state, particularly at the elementary level. I'm out of time. Sorry. Well, thank you for your time. All right.
I did not hear that pretty noise. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Excuse me. Now, you all can go ahead and discuss J if the board would like, because there was a public speaker, but I would ask that the board go back to H and I at some point. I'll go ahead and explain. H, due to the change in state law, we would ask that the board approve that on first reading and skip a second reading, because that goes into effect July 1st. I, just a clarification, that is not required by state law. I mean, if this board wants to do that, that's a great gesture, but I is not required by state law. But likewise, if you want to provide I, we would ask that both H and I be approved on first reading.
Okay, so we will continue with this motion on the floor, and then we'll revisit those. Does that sound okay? All right, Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, my brain went to that one for a minute. Now I'm going to try to get it back. Okay, yes, I'm sort of on J. I don't have an objection to J. I know we've had in the past quite a lot of discussion. Wait a minute. Quite a lot of discussion about release. Wait, we're on J or we're on I? I, course credit earned?
It's J on my screen.
But it's I-122, so that.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I suddenly can't read. Okay. I'm okay. Okay, so we've had a lot of discussion about this in the past, and I was opposed to that policy in the past because it was for very small children. I want the board to understand that I'm not objecting to this policy. However, I don't think this policy is ready because there's some pretty major pieces of it that I think we need to look at. I looked for Campbell County's version and I didn't find it. I actually, as I was looking for it, I got confused and started thinking I was in the wrong county. So I looked for some other counties too who are doing some version of release time, and they did have a version but not a credit version. And so I'd really like to look at another county's version that has the credit in there so we can see how they do that. The piece that most concerns me though is the piece that says the board shall approve the curriculum, and here it doesn't say that the board will approve. It's for a credit. So if we are looking at approving for a credit, I would think we would want to approve that in advance so that a student doesn't go through a course and then end up maybe not getting credit for that. But in the policy, it doesn't say that the board will approve it. It says that it will be, somewhere here, it says it will be the curriculum supervisor's approval. And I don't think that aligns with what the law says. Mr. Dupler, can you help us with that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Owen. I'll say a couple things. I mean, one, I mean, the board can certainly delegate to other individuals within the system as far as, you know, approving the curriculum. The language in the proposed policy does come for the vast majority of it out of the state law. But I will also say this, Dr. Wilson and I spoke briefly before the meeting, and you know, he feels like that likely there could be a couple tweaks done. So, but this was placed on the agenda to get this opportunity out there. So that's certainly something that we could take a look at before second reading, is to fine tune it some more. Yeah.
So, Mr. Dupler, if the law says that the board shall, we could still delegate that away?
I'd have to look at the law again.
Which line are you on, Ms. Owen?
It's not necessarily a line here. I'm thinking about in the law where it says that the board shall approve the course before credit can be awarded. And so that's my concern, is that it very specifically says the board shall. And we are saying that the curriculum supervisors will do it. And I don't understand if we have the legal authority to give it away when the law says that we shall.
Well, if I may, when we've discussed this, basically, the way that we approve new courses is through a course code, as when the board approves that. So it would have to go through that process. So before there would be anything in a school, this board would have to approve an MOU with the entity. There would be a course code. Like, this is just one step. There would be multiple steps before any course would be offered in a school. So all this policy is saying is that this board would accept the credit that a student would earn if a course were offered, which is, as has been stated, is part of state law. So this would just allow parents to access that credit for students if there were something that was offered. And maybe Dr. Wilson could speak to, the process, but there would have to be a course code. There would have to be an MOU with an organization. So we would certainly have other steps before anything would be offered in a school, because you'd have to have a course code.
And I understand all those additional steps. My concern is that the piece of the law that says that the board shall is not here. And so if we miss something that we're required to do, and then a student gets through this course and they don't get credit because we messed up, I want to be sure that it's correct here, that if it's our legal requirement for the board to approve it, that we have that language and that we do approve it, so that it's not approved by someone else and then a student ends up taking the course and not getting credit because we don't word it correctly.
I would think if we went through the process correctly that wouldn't, I don't know.
Dr. Wilson, do you have anything you would like to add?
Probably not anything that makes it clearer, but I would be happy to discuss it. So, and I'll say, Ms. Owen, I'm looking at the paper you shared with me the other night. So, in looking further at this, and that's kind of why I talked to Gary about that, when it talks about the board's responsibility that the board shall review for this course, it's really outlining that around the ascribing the credit. If you look at the offering of the course, any kid can participate without that oversight, but when we get to offering the credits, there is that call for that. And what it really says is essentially that review does not involve any test for religious content or denominational affiliation. The secular criteria used would be, one, to look at that amount of classroom instruction time, to look at the course syllabus, which reflects the course requirements and the materials used in the course, which is probably the closest to curriculum that I would say we get to reviewing, and that the methods of assessment that are used in the course, that it would, whether or not the course was taught by an instructor licensed pursuant to Chapter 5, which again, if we're not giving credit, it appears the law does not require that license for that instructor. So again, when we talk about that test, I think the test for if it were the board or if it were supervisors would, this is an external entity offering a course to Knox County students at no cost to Knox County. And I would liken it, we don't really have other things that I could draw a parallel to other than say like a dual enrollment course that is offered through an MOU on a post-secondary campus by a post-secondary instructor. And in those cases, again, we have MOUs that outline the courses we offer and things like that. But, again, that's a internal process that where we look at those. I can't speak legalities to whether or not our supervisors are authorized to assess that on behalf of the board, and so your question, I really can't answer to that. But I think our review of it would be pretty specific to those time constraints, to ensuring there's no controversial material in terms of like that would break the law that we would be aware of, and then that we had licensed instructors and course codes and all of those things. So that's what I would think our test would be for that.
And I would understand all of that. And in my mind, all of that belongs in the procedure that goes with this policy. So And Ms. Horn, to answer your question, really, technically, it's line 35. And so all of this other language is on that piece of paper that Dr. Wilson has, and that's straight from TCA. The only words that are different, if I'm recalling correctly, curriculum supervisors is what's there instead of the Board of Education. So the curriculum supervisors part, I would expect to find in the procedure. I would expect us to be in the policy, because the curriculum supervisors would be doing all of that part before it ever came to us for our approval. And since the law says that we have to approve, and all this language is under what we have to approve, I would expect us to be here in this policy and the curriculum supervisors to do the prior piece, which would be in procedure. Does that make sense, Mr. Dupler?
It does. And again, I do believe this policy will need to be tweaked slightly. I think the essence is there, certainly, but I think what was trying to be conveyed there is the curriculum supervisor is going to take a look at this first. Someone with administration is going to take a look at this first, but ultimately, and I think this is what Ms. Horn is saying too, is that the board will ultimately have to approve the actual course through an MOU and probably course code and whatever else is required. But I think everybody's saying the same thing, which is yes, the board will have to approve the actual course at some point. Yes.
Okay, I don't mind having curriculum supervisors in here somewhere, but I mean, I could vote for it if it said that we were approving, which would match the law. And if we need another step that says curriculum supervisors would do it first, I don't feel like that's necessary, but I feel like the necessary part is the part that's actually in the law. And obviously, I'm not a lawyer either, but I would feel comfortable voting for it if it matched what that one line says from that piece of the law, because the rest of this does match.
Can I ask a question, Mrs. Horn, since you brought this? And I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't do that, that part of the need to bring this now would be if an organization is interested in pursuing this, they obviously don't want to pursue it unless they know that we're willing to.
Yeah, so the organization could form and actually bring us an MOU without students getting credit for the course, because they have that right under the state law and as the religious release time law allows. However, since the legislature increased this from a half credit to a full credit, this entity would like to offer it to students for credit, but it is important for them to be able to know what they're actually dealing with at that point. So to me, this is a first step, because there will be several other steps of approval process as the process goes along. But the entity would like to be able to know whether they have whether this board is going to allow for this credit to be accepted. And like I said, that's going to take some time. If we need to tweak something before we even get to second reading, I think back to Ms. Owen's question, I think that we need to, the verbiage here would need to match whatever is appropriate with the law, but also what we do with other courses. I don't think that this board is going to review the curriculum for this any more than we would for any other course, which I don't think that we're in the habit of specifically reviewing curriculum. That we typically have our curriculum supervisors who do that work and bring it to us. So I feel like that we would, through the approval process with the MOU, with the course code, I feel like we would be completing all those steps to satisfy the law. If Mr. Dupler feels like the verbiage needs to be tweaked somewhat, that's fine. But I think that, as he said, in the spirit of the policy is a first step toward an entity being able to utilize that release time and students receiving credit.
So in looking at line 35 or 34, 35, Ms. Owen. Is that something, are you saying if we put in that language there, the Board of Education?
I don't have the, could Dr. Wilson read that line for us since the paper's still there, or throw it in? The one about shall.
Sure. Okay, I may read too much. I'm going to start where I think we're at. So the local Board of Education may adopt a policy to award students credit for work completed in a release time course. Fast forward. If the board adopts a policy in accordance with this subsection, then a student may be awarded a credit, now unit of elective credit for the completion of each release time course. In order to determine whether elective credit may be awarded for the student's completion of a release time course, the local Board of Education shall evaluate the course in a neutral manner that does not involve any test for religious content or denominational affiliation. For the purposes of this subsection G, the secular criteria used to evaluate a release time course may include those factors that are listed.
Okay, so Madam Chair, to answer your question, I would take line 35, and instead of saying Knox County Schools curriculum supervisors are to evaluate, I would change it to the Knox County Board of Education shall evaluate. And that way, I think it matches.
I mean, that's fine with me if that is satisfying to the board. I think in the spirit of this, I think that Knox County Board of Education employs all the employees. So to me, it's saying the same thing. But if the board feels better about it matching the law specifically, I mean, obviously the curriculum supervisors are designees of this board, and I think so. To me, it's the same difference.
I would hate for us to grant credit and then somewhere along the line, someone sue and those credits somehow be taken away by a judge because we didn't do exactly what the law says. So I think just making sure that we do it correctly and that we follow what's there is all I'm trying to do.
So would that be a friendly amendment you were making to the policy, or? And
Yeah, Madam Chair, since we're going to tweak it on the fly, I mean, you know, if we're going to use Ms. Owen's language, my suggestion would be you also need to add some language in that same section stating that, you know, the board, to the effect that the board is evaluating this course just like any other secular course. I mean, you know, because that's Ms. Horn's concern, which is, and sounds like we're all concerned about getting sued, rightly so. But Ms. Horn's point is we don't want to be discriminatory either. So.
Yes, I think to that point, I would prefer that we say that it is that Knox County Schools, if you want to say Board of Education, will review this course as any other course offered. And then to comma, evaluate the course neutrally, blah, 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 as it is stated.
Mr. Watson.
Chair. So I'm very visual, and maybe I heard it incorrectly, but Dr. Wilson, on what you wrote with the paper, did it say the Board of Education shall evaluate, or did it say shall approve?
Local Board of Education shall evaluate the course.
Okay. I wish it said approve, but.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Ms. Horn.
If I may, everybody needs to understand that the curriculum will be evaluated by the staff to make sure that the time is met, that there are tests, that it is a course as they would have at school, that it is a valid school course. However, the content will be based on the class that is offered. So the school system, that's the whole purpose of it being offered off campus and being paid for without taxpayer funds. The content is not under the purview of the school system.
Yeah. Sorry, Ms. Warren, I wasn't actually done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
I
okay.
apologize.
No, it's fine. I only have one other comment, and I don't know if this satisfies Ms. Owen's concerns, but my suggestion would be on line 35 to say that the Knox County Board shall approve the curriculum based on the Knox County Schools Curriculum Supervisor's evaluation. Because to me, the function of the evaluating is the supervisor, and we're ultimately approving it. So to me, it would be the board is approving based on their evaluation. That's the way I would
Right.
change it, because I actually don't think technically we're going to be doing the evaluation.
Right. I mean, we don't,
I'd love to agree with that, but our legislators wrote some language that amazingly doesn't make sense. The reason we can't approve this as we would any other curriculum is because the rest of our curriculum is approved at the state level. And if we look at some of the policies that we looked at last time that aren't on this agenda, several of them said very clearly, we only use curriculum approved by the state. Well, this is something that is not curriculum that's approved by the state. It's approved only locally. And it can't go through any other process because there's not a process where we approve other curriculum. We don't evaluate curriculum that the state gives us. You know, here it is. And then our supervisors choose which one to use, and we don't really deal with that. That's all administrative. But the legislature has created language that, as Mr. Watson pointed out, we would love for it to say approve, but it doesn't. It says that the board shall evaluate, and that's problematic. And it's not asking us to evaluate the content, it's asking us to evaluate the course, and everything is very clear there, but it is asking that the board evaluates and not the curriculum supervisors. So I mean, if we want to add something about a process shall be determined by the curriculum supervisors, that's fine. I mean, that would be procedure. I don't think we even need that, though, because the superintendent has the authority to delegate to staff or to promulgate rules himself for all the procedures. I mean, he has that administrative authority to create procedures. So as long as we have the policy that says that the board is going to evaluate, then the procedure can take anything else and have the curriculum supervisors do all those pieces. So that would, I mean, I think that's all there, and I don't think it needs to necessarily be stated here, but it could be if that would help things. The only thing, I mean, I'm not objecting to this at all. I'm only trying to make sure that we follow what it says so that a student doesn't somehow lose a credit for us messing up.
Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fine with it the way it's stated. As I said before, I think that it's implied that those folks work for the Knox County Board of Education. Mr. Dupler, if you disagree, then I think maybe we should change it. Otherwise, I'm fine with voting on it as it is.
Thank you, Ms. Horn, Madam Chair. I'll go back to what I originally stated, which is if the board wants to go ahead and pass this on first reading due to the time constraints, Dr. Wilson and I can take another look at it and take into account what Ms. Owen has stated tonight and bring back a revised version for second reading that hopefully would fully cover and make the state law as clear as possible, to Ms. Owen's point, which is not always real clear, but do our best to try and make it more clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dupler. All right, so we have a motion by Ms. Horn and a second by Ms. Henderson, right, to approve this policy. Do we need a roll call? I don't think so. So all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So, looks like motion carries.
Going back.
Yes,
Okay.
we will go back to the other two. So, going back to, oh. Okay, so we have a motion to go back and approve H&I on first reading by Mr. Triplett and a second by Ms. Henderson.
Point of order.
Yes.
And I don't care that we're doing that, but are we able to go back rules of order if we've already approved something in the meeting? I didn't think we could go back and revote on an issue that's been voted on.
I think if you're on the winning side.
Well,
And I'm definitely not a Robert's Rule expert. I'm just asking the question.
you're not, well, so I mean, you know, the answer to that is the same motion is not coming back up. I mean, you know, this is a new motion to enhance basically what already's been voted and approved.
Okay.
So it's not revoting on the same motion with the intent of perhaps defeating it. It's to add to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Dupler, it may have changed, but I believe the law used to say that as long as it was in the same meeting and you were on the prevailing side, that you could revisit something if you wished. Is that still true?
Yes, you're correct, Mr. McMillan, but I don't even think that would apply in this particular situation due to the fact that you're not revoting on that exact same motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Dupler, I believe you said that I misspoke when I said that the parental leave in the second one for classified employees was also in the law, correct? So it's just teacher, just
The new law only applies to certified
to
employees.
certified staff, okay. While we're looking at approving these on first reading, has the staff looked at potential cost?
Ms. Himmelgarn?
Madam Chair, Ms. Owen, yes, we have. So the cost would be the substitute for the employee that's out. So there's not, the additional cost for the employee that is taking the leave would be potentially additional sick days or personal vacation days in the future. They would just continue their regular salary for the 6 weeks. The cost would be for the substitutes. So for classified specifically, last year we had roughly 24 classified employees over the course of the year that would have qualified for the paid parental leave and also been eligible for a substitute. So maybe slightly more than that would have qualified for the leave, but not for a substitute. Depending on the nature of the classified position, so most of our classified employees that would receive a substitute would be school secretaries, educational assistants, or educational assistants in our satellite classrooms. And for 6 weeks, that'd be roughly 30 business days, and an average of $100 to $115 a day for those substitutes.
Thank you.
All right, so we have the motion to approve H&I on first reading. Right? And waiving second. Okay. By. Yeah. She knows. So motion by Mr. Triplett and a second by Ms. Horn. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9K, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-123, Academic Acceleration as amended.
Motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9L, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-340, promotion, retention, acceleration as amended.
Motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Horn. Discussion, Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to look and make sure this is the one I'm thinking about. This is third grade retention, right? I think some of the things that are happening at the state level have changed since this policy was drafted. Do we need to go back and look at that again? What I'm thinking is, under the notifications, I'm not seeing anything about appeal processes and that kind of thing.
We'd be happy to go back and make sure. I know some of those things have been updated in the last several weeks, and so, yeah, we'd be happy to go back and look at that in advance of the next meeting if needed. Yeah.
Okay, do we need to keep this here for now? And, do we need it in place quickly?
Yeah, I would ask Dr. Phillips as far as like the timeliness, if the changes that are in here are time sensitive, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I believe that these updates are really, some of them are time sensitive in accordance with what's currently happening that our students are facing. I can easily go back and make those modifications around the appeals process. I also updated board or the procedure associated with this policy, and so what I can do is couple the policy with procedure so that you can also see what's outlined in procedure as well as what's in the policy.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I would want to be sure that we don't get so specific that when it wiggles again next year, that we have to do it all again. So.
Yes, ma'am. That is why I made some changes to the procedure and not necessarily in the policy, because we do anticipate that there may be some changes. And then with the amended portion of the law taking effect July 1, I also planned ahead for that. And so the procedure outlines much more detail than the policy does, just for that very reason.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Dr. Phillips, or Dr. Wilson, so this is one we need to approve on first reading? Is that?
I would recommend approval on first read, but knowing that we could make some modifications per the appeals process.
Ms. Owen?
I wonder if we should hold it and approve it on first reading in July?
I think as long as we approve before July 14th, which it's close, but I would want it, I would want it approved before final retention notices have to go out on July 14th.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Ms. Owen?
Do we have a motion on the floor already?
Mr. Watson made a motion to approve.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment to approve on first reading.
And Ms. Horn? Okay. So we have a friendly amendment to approve this on first reading. Motion in a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9M, approve first reading of new Knox County Board of Education Policy J359, private practitioners.
Madam Chair, can we take a recess before a motion becomes on this issue?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
So we'll do a quick 10-minute. Hello. All right, and we are back. Ms. Coatney?
So we are on item 9M, approve first reading of new Knox County Board of Education Policy J359, private practitioners.
Can we? Okay. Yes, but can I make a friendly amendment to approve it on first reading? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Ms. Henderson, I think we have public forum.
Yes, Madam Chair. First up, we have Jennifer Rose. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
You know the drill.
I know the drill. At least it's Thursday, right, guys? We're almost to Friday. Jennifer Rose, Knox County. Again, I just want to thank everybody for their time the last few months working together and collaborating, coming up with a policy that will benefit all of our students further, in life and education, which is the ultimate goal. And just encourage the vote, for first reading and that we get this approved. We don't want, to have to struggle and put everybody in a bind come August if we have to go to July, and force extra work and quicker work, on KCS staff and everything. But I think ultimately we have here with us tonight BCBAs that have together over 30 years of experience, clinical directors. So Miss Emily owns her own clinic. She's part of the Tennessee Association for Behavior Analytics. We have Nikki with us tonight as well. She's been in the field over 18 years, plenty of experience that's here during the discussion. If there's anything you guys might have questions about, they're more than happy to answer, can tell you guys what it looks like in the field, how beneficial it is. So we just really encourage, and hope that you guys will vote this through tonight so that we can all continue to work together to get everything in place for August. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jennifer. Nicole Shreve. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nicole Shreve. I am a BCBA here in East Tennessee. I'm a Knox County resident. And I wanted to thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and to encourage you to vote to pass this on the first reading. I also want to thank the group of passionate women who have been here every time they've had the opportunity to speak on this. I'm sure most of you know their names quite well at this point. And I wanted to say that in my years of experience, I have had plenty of opportunities to work in numerous counties here in East Tennessee in the school setting. And I have seen it work. I've seen it be a success. I have had the pleasure of being part of a really collaborative and positive relationship with both the teachers in these classrooms as well as the administration to make sure that we are providing services that are beneficial to our students, but also that work within the classroom and that we are able to work with our students and our clients in a way that allows the teacher to also participate in her classroom. So if there is safety risks, if there's elopement risks, we can be first up to intervene in those instances and allow and really provide a safer environment for both our students and the other students in the classroom. We are there with these students to help promote functional communication skills, to work through some social skills and social situations that otherwise might not be seen as an opportunity of learning because they don't have that direct support person with them, and we are able to provide that. And so I just want to encourage you to really think about the benefits. And again, I'm here if there's any questions that I can answer, as I have worked in this environment before in the way that we're proposing tonight. And I want to thank you for the time to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney?
Good evening. Courtney Piper, I'm a Knox County resident. I want to encourage the Board of Education to vote in favor of this policy, and I encourage you to pass it on first reading. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Courtney. Sorry. Allison Pasternak. Welcome. I think you know the drill, too.
Yes, I do. Allison Pasternak, Knox County. I'll keep it brief, maybe not quite as brief as Courtney, but I do want to thank all of you sincerely for listening to us as parents. I think that in the past, like so many large entities, we get caught up in doing things the way that we have always done them. And I know we as parents have been asking for this for a very long time, and we have been told that it's never been allowed, so it's not allowed. And I do want to thank the superintendent. I want to thank Mr. Myers for all the work that you have done, and Mr. Dupler, who's not here right now. But I do want to thank you all for the work you've done and for really looking at this issue and saying, we've never done this, we've never allowed this, but why not? And would this be a benefit? And just because we haven't done it in the past, does that mean that we should continue to deny this? And so I appreciate all of your work. I appreciate you listening to us, reading our countless emails. And I would really just ask that you would vote to approve this policy this evening and to approve it on first reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes public forum for this item.
All right, so we have a motion by Reverend Butler, a second by Mr. Triplett to approve this policy on first reading and waive second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 10A, approve Tennessee Department of Education consolidated application for fiscal year 2024 IDEA Part B grant in the amount of $14,674,486 and IDEA preschool grant in the amount of $448,043.
Motion by Mr. Watson, second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10B, approve Tennessee Department of Education fiscal year 2023 Summer Learning Camps grant in the amount of $5,993,376.28 and Summer Learning Transportation grant in the amount of $1,087,033.93.
Motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10C, approve Tennessee Department of Education fiscal year 2023 additional targeted support and improvement grant in the amount of $825,000.
Motion by Dr. Butler, second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10D, approve memorandum of understanding with Knox Education Foundation for grant funding in the amount of $10,000 for Knox County Schools Elevate program.
Motion by Dr. Butler, second by Ms. Horn. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10E, approve Dollar General Literacy Foundation grants in the amount of $4,000 for Amherst Elementary School and Fulton High School.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10F, approve Casey's Cash for Classrooms grant in the amount of $46,750 for Austin East Magnet High School.
Motion by Dr. Butler, second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Approve Melissa Hope Foundation grant in the amount of $125,000 for Dogwood Elementary School.
Motion by Dr. Butler, second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10H, approve United Cleanup Oak Ridge LLC STEM Education mini grants in the amount of $2,250 for Farragut High School and Farragut Primary School.
Motion by Ms. Horn, second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10I, approve TVA Energy Right Learning Environment grant in the amount of $25,000 for Hardin Valley Elementary School.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, a second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10J, approve Tennessee Foundation for Agriculture in the Classroom grant in the amount of $500 for Southdale Middle School.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11A, approve contracts with FaciliServe, Fisher Installation LLC, doing business as bleachersandseats.com, and Maxwell Athletics for bleacher inspection, repair, and installation services, up to $1,200,000 annually for the term of July 1, 2023 through June 20, 2024, which may be extended for 4 additional years.
Motion by Mr. Watson, second by Dr. Butler. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
11B, approve contracts with Chris Haggard Plumbing LLC, McMahon Mechanical Incorporated, and Lee Company for plumbing services up to $1,500,000 per year for the term of July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, which may be extended for 4 additional years.
Motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Mr. Watson. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 11C was withdrawn. 12A, approve fund balance designation in the amount of $1,653,000 to subsidize Title I funding.
Motion by Dr. Butler, second by Mr. Watson. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12B, approve budget line item transfer from closed Bricky McLeod Elementary School project account to the new Mill Creek Elementary School project account in the amount of $248,273.56.
Motion by Ms. Henderson, second by Mr. Watson. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
12C, approve schematic designs for Innovate School Models grant projects at Central High School, Farragut Middle School, Fulton High School, Carnes Middle School, and Carnes High Schools.
Motion by Ms. Owen, a second by Ms. Henderson. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Ms. Henderson, do we still have?
Yes,
public
we have a
forum?
few more public forum speakers. Let's see. Heather Anderson. Is Heather still here? We'll take that as a no. Annabelle Henley.
Thanks. I'm glad this was moved down because I'm short too. Good evening. I wanted to tell you all how excited I am about the strategic plan for Region 5. The methodology that was used to gain input from so many stakeholders was very well done, especially including the parents and the students in the planning. Such a good precedent to set for the improvements we all want to see for students and the teachers who are called to serve them. I noted several comments from students that I've also heard over the past few years with regards to the discipline expectations, and I'm so hoping that this new strategic plan, there will also be clearly defined goals and objectives designed to address the discipline disparities that have been so apparent in what we're now calling Region 5. I think the Region 5 way is setting a precedent for excellence that's very exciting, but it will fall short if the discipline disparities are not addressed. So I wanted to encourage you as a board to make sure the data regarding discipline disparities is made available, along with the other measurements being taken to determine improvement in Region 5. I also want to encourage the training and implementation of restorative practices in all classrooms in Region 5. I understand from talking with Janice Cook that there's a restorative classroom in each school with coaches in these classrooms. But what I hear from the students and the teachers is that these classrooms are viewed by students as just an in-school suspension room, which completely negates the restorative process. So often the coaches have to be pulled to sub or perform other duties. So it's imperative that all staff be trained in restorative practices. Each classroom, hallway, cafeteria, library, etc., become a place where students experience the community that comes from the restorative process. Thank you for your commitment to success for every student and for considering how restorative practices can be a huge part of addressing discipline disparities and achieving the success. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, this concludes public forum.
With that, our meeting is adjourned.